going. Cool. Okay, so again, thanks for coming, and we're going to be going through the very basics of After Effects, which tonight, for our purposes, is going to include just basic transform effects and transformations to layers and images, as well as the basics of the interface, understanding, and getting ready for export and rendering. So basically, the smallest and summarized pipeline I can give you for what this program can do. So, to get started, if you have After Effects, open this new window. So we'll start by, is everyone at this? Everyone hit new project? Think so? Right? Okay. So to get started, you're going to see a lot of panels when you first get into this. And every single one has a purpose. Every single one works with each other, and you need to understand what it does in order to not get really messed up in the long run. So
why does my screen look different than yours?
Could be in a different workspace for one. So first of all, new project. So right up here, you'll see these little words here: default, standard, small screen libraries, all panels. These are workspaces, and this is basically Adobe's way of trying to assist the artist by giving you different options for the layout for the UI. So for instance, when you're in default, this is what Adobe recommends as the default, but the great thing about it is it's completely configurable, and these are just the presets. So standard, small screen, libraries, yada, 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 they all do different things, but they're all good for different tasks. So you get into that once you get more advanced with it. But to start, you'll see on the left here this project panel, and then this little tab called Effect Controls. The project panel is very similar in Premiere, where you will be importing and organizing all of your data, all of your video files, all of your layers, all your images. This is where it'll come in, and in the same way as Premiere, you'll have this option down here for bins. So again, organization is really crucial, especially in this, when you have all these different types of file formats. You have to keep them straight, you have to keep them labeled, otherwise you're going to create a big mess by the end of your web. And then again, effect controls here. This is where your menu options for your effects will appear once you get to that point. We'll go over that in a little bit. Moving on here, we have the composition and layer panel. Within this, a composition, if you guys don't know what that is, it's a container for all kinds of media. It is how you view things. It is like your canvas that you paint on. That's how you work in After Effects. So, and then within that is a layer, and that's when you work within layers. Again, we'll get into that. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see a timeline, and again, that's similar to Premiere in that it is linear, 0 seconds, all the way up to whatever your composition is set to. But right here is where it kind of differs. So instead of it being a nonlinear editor like Premiere, where you have layers stacked in an order across time, you're having layers stacked, and similarly to Photoshop more so. So it's a lot more artistic potential because there's a lot more layers you can work with at once instead of over a long period. Moving on again, here you'll see this long list of tabs here just because I'm in the all panels mode. But this is where all your other options are going to appear and where you can find them for different things. And you'll see you can make things bigger by selecting a panel. So whenever I select something, you'll notice this blue kind of selection around it, and that's really key because whenever you're doing keystrokes, whenever you're doing like a shortcut to do something, you have to be selected in the right panel or else it's not going to work, and that's going to be very frustrating. So selecting the right panel to be in is a huge thing that really trips people up to start. So be aware of that, as well as once and everything's also modular, like I said. So everything you can change the size of. If you want to see more of this, or if you just want to make your entire screen one panel, if you click on it, select one panel, press the tilde key, which is under the escape, it'll make it full screen, or well, almost full screen. So again, that's whatever you click on, you make full screen. So that's incredibly useful when you want to look at details and zoom in and such. Okay, so any questions with that?
You can turn those panels off, right?
Yeah, so anything you don't want to see, you can get rid of, you can add. So you'll see up here on the menus, you'll have window, and this is where all of the different window and panel options that you can find. So these are all like different plugins that don't come with After Effects, but these are the basic ones. So say you are missing your effect controls. You can see this little X. I'm missing my effect controls. I can't see the settings for my effects. I go to Window, down to Effect Controls right here, and select it, and there it comes back, and vice versa. You can get rid of them. Just by this little 3-line thing is your settings for each one. So you can close the panel, undock it, to make it a separate thing, or you can move it and click and drag and to be anywhere you'd like to change it. And if you ever need to get back to it, if you ever mess it up somehow, just hit Window and you'll see Workspace. come over here and you'll see reset. It's going to, whatever panel you're in, it's going to be in quotes, and then to save layout. So it'll reset it to what it should be, or if you like what you did, so say you changed, for some reason I like this over here and it looks great this way, I can go workspace, save changes to this workspace, and then anytime I come back and it gets messed up, I can reset it to what I like. So it's really configurable. It's really great for beginners as well as more advanced people alike. So it's great. So there's that. And now to get started working in After Effects to apply some of these interfaces together. Oh, lastly, sorry. You'll see right above this project panel are these toolbar options. So this is where all your tools are going to be once you have a canvas to work on. And to create a composition, there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing in this program, which is great. It's really custom configured for anyone that wants to use it. So to make new composition, I could click this guy right here. I'm going to get a dialog for the settings for what I need to do. Otherwise, I could hit this little button down here, create a new composition. I could go to composition up here and press new composition, or as the shortcut says, Command N, and I get new composition. Lots of different ways to do the same exact thing. As well as there's another way to do it, but that's when you have the layer in here. So again, to get started, you'll make a new composition, name whatever you want. I'll just call it Park Post Demo. You'll see your settings as far as, so we're at HD 1920 by 1080. The presets custom, which is what you're probably going to want to work in, and as well as this is what you're looking for, the length and duration of your composition or your timeline. So you can think of every composition almost as an individual movie project because it's like a folder. It contains what you're making, but it gets complicated because compositions can go within each other. So it's like folders and then folders and then folders, so it builds quickly. So just to get started here, I made mine 150 frames just because that's 5 seconds-ish, with 24 frames per second. It's cinema quality. Otherwise, you can change your settings here. Just press OK, and now you have a composition. You're going to see it's all black, or yours is going to look like this checkerboard here, and this checkerboard means it's on an alpha. It means there's transparency behind it. There's not black. There's not white. It's on nothing. So that can you get into that later. But this little button down here is how you toggle that transparency grid. So if you want to see the edge of something not on black, it's helpful for that. As well as now you see we have a little scroll bar here during our timeline. So again, this just refreshes how this should work. And to get started with a layer to bring it in, you can bring something in, of course, by going to the project panel, either double-clicking or right-clicking and hit import, or again, there's file import, there's right-click, new import file. There's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. For my purposes, we pass this graphic around. I'm just going to bring this park tank graphic in, double-click, and you see it just pops up here as an Illustrator file. And that other way I mentioned to create a composition saves you a lot of time if you don't want to go through the process of resetting your settings and typing in all the things. If you click and drag that file, you'll get this little green plus. If you drag that down to the composition and release, it will make it the perfect size for what that file was. So it kind of is a shortcut for it. And you'll see it makes a new composition, and this is how you tab between your different layers, or your different compositions, excuse me. And yeah, so now we have this guy, and you'll see we're on the selection tool, and this is how we move stuff around. This is how you make selections when you have hundreds of layers on top of each other and you need to click on things, but otherwise you can find everything tileable in here. Yeah, so that's that guy. And in addition to bringing things in importing-wise, you can just create a shape. So if we go back to the first one where it's playing, you'll see up here you have a rectangle tool, and when you click on that, you're going to get a lot more settings right here for the color of the fill, the color of the stroke, and the size of the width of the stroke. But you don't have to worry about that. You can just click and drag, and wherever you click, that's the corner that you're going to make. It's free-forming. It can be whatever size and shape you want, unless you hold Shift. You're going to make it a perfect square. So it's just a freehand way of making it a lot quicker. And then once you make it, you release, and now you have a square. And right away, you're going to notice if you start clicking again that there's an issue with the tool selection here. Because if I start clicking and dragging, trying to make it move, oh, I just made another rectangle. Oh, I just made another. Now I have a mess. So you'll see down here in your layer panel, you have all these rectangles stacking up within a shape layer. And a shape layer is different than it is in in Premiere, because a shape layer is singular in Premiere versus in After Effects they combined all the shapes to fit within a layer or on separate layers. So within this now I have all my 4 rectangles, so if I wanted to delete them I would have to select them here, and I'm just using Shift to select multiple, and then I can just press delete and get rid of it. And if I wanted to make a shape on a different layer, you would have to click off of it and make sure you're selecting the selection tool in order to move it again. So otherwise, you're going to have all these shapes stacking. Otherwise, you can just use a selection tool and move it. Cool. So then,
Hey Nico, why would you use a shape layer? That seems really complex.
it does seem really complex, but it's Adobe's way of trying to help keep everything neat. When you have a lot of shapes and a lot of files and layers and sound and yada 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 on top of each other, it gets really confusing. It gets very messy. It gets very distracting to look at. So the goal of the shape layer is to utilize these tabs to say you have 50 shapes within one image that you made. You design a rocket ship in Photoshop, and now you have this awesome shape. Instead of having every single shape be its own layer, you can just have it within its one layer, and then it's much neater. You can do all the effects and everything to one layer instead of to a lot, which would increase your computer.
Isn't it also vector based?
Yeah, so does anyone know the difference between vector and raster? Is that new terms to everyone? Okay, so vector and raster. It's very important for this kind of work. For this line of work, you should understand it. Vector basically has to do with the pixel alignment, so the pixels. So vector can be stretched to any size, and it will not change. I don't really say it wrong. It doesn't change the aspect ratio, but it's changing.
Resolution.
Yeah, you're not losing resolution between size and shape.
It uses algorithms to like adjust the shape as you adjust the dimensions.
Yeah, versus in Photoshop, when you bring an image in, if you notice that you scale it up and down, you're kind of decreasing the resolution as you scale it up versus when you scale it down. Vector images retain the same quality throughout the size because of the algorithms used to create the shape.
So the Park Tank logo, for example, when I scale it up, let's say, I'm seeing that it's showing me more of a more pixelated image. Why would that be?
Because it's raster and not vector, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's everything displayed is raster, so it's converting vector to raster.
Yeah, unless you continually raster.
Yeah, it's continuous rasterization.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
it's kind of a that little if you want to talk about maybe switches down there,
Yeah.
just that one button.
yeah, so
If you
this
scale
guy.
up your vector graphic and you notice that it's pixelating, that little sun box right there is like that, for example.
So if we
it's like,
scale it
why-
up-
that's vector. I know it is. So why does it look like that? After Effects is interpreting the file to rasterize it.
Until you press this button,
Yeah.
which
and
is
then
how you
put it
get.
back.
Yeah, which is how you get the clean scale. So I'll do that again. You can see this is very clean. This is a little more rough. It's a lot more feathered almost looking on the edges. It's not as sharp. So when you're bringing images in, this becomes incredibly important because you're maintaining the quality of the images that you're using and the shapes and the logos and yada, yada, yada. But that's so while we're down here, you'll see when you bring in a layer, you get all these other options now to play with. So on the left, starting left to right, you have the eye. That's how you turn things on and off. You have this little, if it had sound, there would be a little button here that you can turn sound on and off. This right here is the solo. So if you have a bunch of layers, this is Adobe trying to help you, instead of trying to look for that one layer, see what it looks like, and really zoom in or whatever, you can just turn this solo off and on, and it'll remove everything else besides what is soloed. So if you have 100 things, you have 3 things soloed, just those 3 things will be soloed, and it helps organize and see things much easier. Moving down here, you see this down arrow. This is how you get into the transform and other settings options of the specific layer. And then additionally, you can change the color if you want to reorganize it, the number of the layer, the type of file, the name of the file, and then going left to right here, you have shy. So shy is the opposite of solo in a way, where shy will turn off shy is meant to, if you have hundreds of layers and just way too much files you're working with, instead of soloing, you can shy the ones you don't want to see and then turn that on and off with this guy here. So it would make more sense if I had a bunch of layers, so I'll just real quick make a bunch. After this, continuing along, this is that continually rasterize, that little sun button. This line is the quality and stamping. Do you know? I kind of know what it has to do with.
It's based on what's being displayed, but it has a lower quality display option that'll be displayed, and then finer and finer resolutions.
Okay, yeah. So it has to do with the quality of
and
the actual
performance, yeah.
specific layer, and it helps with performance. Effects. What's this one? Frame blending. And then these are your 3 most used, I would say, overall in this program with the layers. You have the motion blur, so if you have something in motion, After Effects interpolates motion blur on its own, and it knows what something or how much it should blur based on algorithms that it has built in, and then you can see turn it on, and then there's another one right here where it actually enables it. So that's a tricky one, but I'll go over that once we start moving things. And then final ones here, you have adjustment layers. So if you are familiar with Premiere or After Effects adjustment layers, or Photoshop adjustment layers, they work in a similar way, and it applies to the composite, like the layers below it. So it's better in practice. And this is how to make a 3D layer. This is when you get to really advanced stuff in After Effects. But it's for now just working 2D. It's pretty great. And this is parenting. This is another new concept in this Adobe program. But just so we get to actually see some stuff happen. The fun stuff is down here in this drop-down arrow. So you see under Transform, you have all your options. You have anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity.
What's an anchor point?
It's a great question. So an anchor point, oh, I almost made a mistake. So I'll make sure I'm selected on the selection tool. And if I zoom back out here, because I'm really zoomed in right now, you'll see this little symbol that are on black right here. So this designates your anchor point, and that is the point at which the transform effects operate around. So it's almost like your vertex point or point of interest. So in the same way that, and you can see this best probably with rotation, if you rotate, the rotation is happening around that point, and then you have your option here to change the anchor point just by going left or right. You'll see that creates kind of like some issue where it almost is moving the entire image to make sense of what you're doing. And in order to, a little tip that'll help you for trying to move this in a spot a little easier, you can actually use this tool up here in your toolbar called the Pan Behind Anchor Point tool. The keystroke is Y. If you click it, you can just drag this into whatever position you'd like. So if you want to put that right there, and then now you're going to rotate specifically just on that axis. And then again, so position, obviously X and Y, scale, change your scale up and down, rotation rotates, opacity is your transparency, turning it off and on, and fading, and that's your basic controls. If you're familiar with Premiere, you recognize this symbol as the stopwatch, and that is for keyframing. So this is where the actual animation part of After Effects comes in. Within your timeline, if you're on 0 and you have what your image looks like here, so let's just say, and just for the time being, I'm going to use a shape probably just because it'll be a little more visual. I'm just going to, again, make a little square, change it to whatever color I like. Red's great. Awesome. Select my selection tool again, and now I have my shape. Here's my anchor point. I'm going to make my position to start at 0 here. I'm going to set my position. That's where I like it. Oh, good one, good one, good one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. A little keystroke as well. If you select a layer and you know what type of transform control you want to do, so any of these options here, they all have keystrokes. So if I just want to see the position of the shape layer, I hit P, and I get position. I hit S for scale. I hit R for rotation. I hit T for opacity. It's a little intuitive. Opacity or transparency, yeah. Opacity, or A for anchor point. So it's just like a freehand thing, and same with if you did it without clicking on a layer, it would do it for everything in the actual little guy. So it's just a little freehand if you want to quickly get to rotation or another transform control.
Is there a shortcut for seeing more than one at once?
Yes, so if you would just, yeah, that's a great point. So in addition to seeing rotation, it'd be really useful for me to see position right now. So if I hold shift while selected on my layer, I can hit shift and then any of those other keyframes or keystrokes I just said. So rotation, there's opacity for T, then I hit S for scale, and now I have all three. And then if I want to get rid of them, I would just either do that again or just use the drop down arrow and get rid of them and get them all back. So again, if you just click on it, P, shift, S, shift, R, you get whatever you want. You can add them. It's really quick. It's great. And now to keyframing. So again, we're going to have our shape here on the left. I'll set my position at 0 frames, and also this is in frames currently, so it's by 10 frames. You'll see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and that's actually really important because when you're working with as detailed and specific of parameters with shapes and motion graphics where things matter on timing, the most specific you can get is down to the frame in this kind of workflow. But if you really just don't like it, or if you want to get an idea of what kind of timeline you're at, if you hold Command or Control on Windows, you would click on this little number guy here, and it actually changes it to a different format. So it shifts between the frames, and I guess it's almost more like seconds, but it's in 12 frames, so it's every half second breakdown, as well as if you need to make your composition longer to get to your settings, you have to go up to composition, and your composition settings are here, or it's Command K, and that's when you can get this dialog box again for one, as if you were just to make a new composition. You can change the length, the quality, the frame rate, the size, yada yada yada. And again, so we're at 0. I like where my shape is here. Maybe I'd like it to be a little rotated, so I'm going to rotate it. I'll set my rotation keyframe by pressing the stopwatch, so it starts the keyframing process, as well as my position, because those are the things that are going to be changing over my sequence. And then I'll move ahead, maybe like 20 frames. So you can see down here I'm at 19, and there's 20. So maybe I want to be over here, and immediately you'll see this line popping up, and that's good. That means you're starting to show the computer's creating interpolated points for this shape between 20 frames and 0 frames. So now that I have this position, I'll also just rotate a little bit more, maybe like this. And now I'll click back to the beginning. You'll notice it's jumping, and it's going in between those 2 points that I just set. So that is the basis for keyframing in Premiere as well, but this is where you can get really creative because you have a lot of different variables to play with as far as all of these things at once. And so you have a little move right here. Now you can do, change the opacity to make it fade out as it goes. So you have a nice little smooth graphic, and then you just have to be creative with it. And that's kind of how you start getting into this. And keyframing is incredibly advanced. There's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of math involved with it, and it takes a lot of practice to get down with. So I encourage you to go into After Effects, start a new project, and just create shapes or bring in images, bring in anything you want, and move it around. Make it dance, make it go around, and you can then also adjust these keyframes by selecting and dragging. So say I want that position to happen a lot faster. I want it to be in less amount of time, so I'd put it closer to the first keyframe, and now it's really just whipping over there. Also, if I put it all the way out there, it's much, much, much slower. That's the idea. So it's a visual way of seeing time pass and transformations occur. So that's the basics of that. And in addition, yeah, that was my next note. So we have this cool little animation. I'll make it a little longer. So now we have this guy. So now we have this guy going across the screen. You'll notice though when it's playing, if I, yeah, sorry, that's a good point. All right. So you'll notice now that I just did this without, I'm trying to explain everything I do, because there's a lot of things that just kind of you naturally pick up on when you're using this, but this little guy is your workspace, not a workspace, it's your work area, yeah. So you still have all of this stuff still happening, all this time occurring, but when you're rendering or when you're playing through, it'll only go through this little bar, and you can just adjust. So say I only want it to be for the end of it, I just want to see the end, that's what it'll play, and if I play it, should just loop that little part right there. And the keystroke for that is if you hit B on a location, so if I go to the beginning of the frame, press B, it'll move it to the beginning, and same with the end is N, so it's just the two right next to each other, and that's just how you change what's rendering. And then also, now you'll see when this is playing, now that I have it looping a little bit, it's not, hold on, chill out. I'm lowering my quality right here. If you see this little drop down, you have auto, full, half, third, quarter, and that just like changes literally what your computer is doing. But if you can hear it, my computer's starting to churn because you're using your graphics card. You're doing a lot of computing. So if you notice while this plays, if it plays, it's just kind of, it's not smoothly transitioning between frames, between moments. It's kind of just going in that direction. So, and you can't really see it great because it's not playing, but I do, yeah.
Might be why it's switching back.
I get to plug that.
So if you have a MacBook, in your system preferences under your energy preferences, many of them have a discrete graphics card and then onboard graphics. And if that option is selected, it can, and you're on battery power, it'll switch off of your discrete graphics card. So if you're seeing a slowdown, that might be the reason for that.
Where was it in? Under
Energy Saver.
Energy Saver.
Second row.
Yeah, there it is. So just in case you want to see
And
it.
so at the top it says automatic graphics switching, and you can turn that off. Unfortunately, you can't set that to be set for battery or power adapter individually. So if you're noticing your battery life is decreased considerably after you do that, you might want to switch it back to just Word and stuff like that. But that's a little better.
Yeah, so now it's actually playing. You can see it. You can hopefully see what I'm talking about. Where it's it just doesn't look like it's actually doing what it's doing. It's just going through these keyframes that we set. And this brings into effect motion blur, which again is this little option here. So you make sure you're on the right layer. You hit this little motion blur guy, and then now we have it, right? No, we're not actually seeing it because this is where you can get tripped up. A lot of times you actually start something in After Effects, you're not seeing it until you turn it on. So right here you'll see the same logo. If you press Enable Motion Blur, you'll see all this green go away because it now has to figure out what these frames now are. And if I press play, there's a lot more of like a blur with it, and it looks a little bit more natural. So can you guys see that?
Nope.
Can't see it?
faster.
Too
Or
faster?
adjust your settings, shutter.
Yeah.
So it'll be a subtle effect for most movement, something that your eye will kind of feel
Yeah, I'll
but not
just do
necessarily see. You can adjust that in the composition settings in the advanced tab. There's an option to adjust shutter angle, which will increase the amount of blur, but just going faster in general. Yeah, you can see the difference between two
Yeah, so I
layers.
put them together. If you see the, let me turn off the opacity. That's definitely not making it easier. So now it loads, and you can see the one edge. That does not look good at all. So let me do this proper way. Sorry about that.
The motion blur kind of takes the direction that the shape is moving and then manipulates the space and time that it would take and how much that would move. Because as things move in time, you're going to see motion. You're going to see this kind of blur that occurs as something moves across the space. So it's basically artificially adding that into your motion. So if it's a really fast motion, it's going to have a lot more blur than if it's a slow motion. That's why it's really subtle, because it's not moving very much.
Yeah, but if I go in my position here and adjust this so it's a lot faster or more drastic of a move, then now it's going to definitely pick up. You're going to see not faded edge. And that really comes in handy when you're doing other things, because even though you might think it actually has what create naturally through the 24 frames per second or 23.976 BC.
So why would you want to maybe turn on motion blur for all layers or turn off motion blur for all layers?
Motion blur is incredibly taxing and heavy on your computer, so usually when you're working, unless you plan on rendering or sending it out for people to see, you can just turn it off, and that's what this is for. So you can set what layers are going to have motion blur, but instead of instead of actually seeing it, you just know it's there by this setting, and you can turn it off so it's less heavy on your computer. And that's just a common thing that you're going to run into when you're trying to click something, and this happens when nothing goes the right way it should, like this. But there's tricks that kind of help to make it better. So lowering, changing off your motion blur, or closing everything else on your computer, that kind of stuff.
The screen recording right now, which usually eats up a considerable amount of time.
Yeah,
so
that's why my guy's struggling a little bit here. But other than that, is there any questions so far? You guys confused or anything? Be honest. Is it helpful? The first time you're seeing it, never seen it, seen it too much?
Maybe check out a practical application.
Yeah, let's look at a practical application. So I worked for Fox Sports when I was in Los Angeles last semester, and a lot of the stuff I was doing was advanced motion graphics with their department for their digital division, so on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, stuff like that. So I have a project file that's just using the exact same stuff that we're doing here, and it was an advertisement for Hisense. So don't save, and it'll open, and Magic Wheel of Death. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so this is kind of what we're talking about with organizing. You just label everything, so composition, and that just helps me put things when I bring them in so I can find them very easily and nothing gets lost.
So if you had to hand off your file to somebody else, it'd be really helpful to have everything clearly labeled
Exactly.
and organized.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. When you're handing off the project file or sharing a project file with people, they have to have access to the same files that you use for the project. So keeping it incredibly organized in a way that you could compress the folder you have everything in and attach that with the project file saves you so much time in the long run going back and forth trying to give everything to the person that needs it. So it's just incredibly important to be organized at all times in this kind of workflow. So just as an example, here's my, this was an end plate for a Hisense commercial for TV. So it's probably not going to play great for first second, but it's a very simple little complexity to this because it is a 3D move, even though it might not look like it. But the idea was, it should play better now. Just have these two little logos popping in, and then there's a little gleam over it, and there was like, I didn't even think about it before when I was just in Park Post like you guys. I didn't think that they would want to see the shine on a different angle as much, or at different speeds, or at different depths and different colors. All this stuff really comes into importance for a corporate company or a company that's looking for work like this. So don't be ashamed of using 100 tests to get a final product, because it really matters in the long run. This is just the beginning of it. But with this, I wanted to kind of just show you, this is an example of a composition within a composition. So within this, if I double click, it'll open up my other composition, which has the actual animation for all this stuff here. So I'll just lower it so it works a little faster. But again, you'll see here that I have all these motion blurs on. I have all these 3D objects on, and making it 3D definitely makes it more complicated. You're working in a 3D space, so instead of working in a 2D space where it's a piece of paper like this, where you're just looking at a TV screen, you're actually working in 3 dimensions. So there's, in addition to X and Y, you now have Z, which is looking at you and looking far away from you. You have to be able to kind of think in that space in order to work in that, and that's why you have to work up with the 2D and really get good with it before trying to do something more advanced. However, this was a pretty simple little animation I did with it because it's just a piece of text. So you'll see here, all I did was I had the position go from up high to a little bit lower, kind of move into place. Okay, as it's dying. Come on.
Yeah, After Effects can be a bear on your processor, but it's usually not this much of a bear.
Yeah, it's screen recording. It's just bogging us down, but it's just so everyone else who's at home watching can, So it's a simple little, it's going from here to here, just to create a little bit of a move with it, as well as I had the opacity, and then the orientation is an option you get when something is 3D. So just to exemplify this, you'll see, again, there's the X value, the Y value, and the Z value. And to show you exactly what this would look like, you can see here, I haven't talked about these, but to the right of that transparency, all these little drop-down options for front, left, top, back, right, bottom. Those are all different perspectives to see in third person, or to see your workspace in a different way, as well as you have multiple options for, you can have 2, you can have 4, and that's when you're working in really 3D space and you need to focus on all the different perspectives at once. So just to exemplify, if I want 2 panels, now I'm seeing right here, I'm seeing the top, and also if you ever want to make the screen zoom in or out, it's obviously like a zoom with your fingers, or the shortcut is Shift, and it'll fill the frame perfectly. A little shortcut for you. As well as if we're working in 3D space, you'll here. Now I have on my actual layer this little, like the transformation handle, and it's just another visual way to see the X, Y, and Z axes visualized. So how it was great for a second. It's hating me.
I usually don't ever really play with the cameras unless I'm doing stuff in 3D, so just like on the 3D stuff, it's fine with just the way it.
Yeah, and that's, exactly. So what you can actually get into really advanced stuff where you are putting cameras into 3D space in this program and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's when it really becomes useful. But for our purposes, active camera is really all you should need to be working in a 2D space. That's the greatest thing to keep consistent. So if you ever are on the wrong view, you can always obviously change it here, or you can again go back to Window, Workspace, Reset to save layout, and it should reset to what it was. And again, I just wanted to show the 3D-ness of it, but it's, so while we have a minute, you'll see the options for what After Effects has for different for renderers. If you're familiar with this and other aspects, you know it's important, but just understand that classic 3D is pretty great, but when you're doing incredibly high intensity stuff, mine usually will just naturally switch to ray traced, but also you can go into it. So if something is really bogging you down, you can switch that, but I don't recommend it. I would just stay in the classic.
And it tells you, like in the brief documentation there, why you would use something like ray trace or some 40 and the limitations of those renders, extruded text and stuff like that. And After Effects ships with a light version of Cinema 4D, so if you're interested in that, you can. The programs work extremely well together, so you can play around in 3D if you have After Effects, because a light version of Cinema 4D ships with it.
Yeah, and Cinema 4D is when you get into real 3D CGI sort of stuff. It's kind of it's Windows only, correct?
No, it's Mac and Windows.
Which one's the
3 Studio Max?
Yeah, 3DS.
Windows.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm really just trying to show this guy one more time, but it's just fighting you. It's at no end. Well, actually, all right. Well, then, just with that in mind, you saw what it looked like. We'll just go into a new project and I'll.
This is the part-time file.
Yeah.
That might be a later project.
Exactly. So if you got that file that we passed around on Slack, we're just going to bring that in. So if the computer ever does it, you just have to double click on the project window, import it, drag it in, select it, whatever it may be.
Oh yeah, it might be space.
Could be. Let's see. What size we at? I don't want to press stop. About this map. I should have had like 50 or 60 gigs. Yeah, 170.
Yeah.
Definitely dropping. But okay, so now we're back to this. And
Huge ball for babies.
yep. Sorry about the delay, guys.
You might want to stay recording if it's going to.
Yeah.
Just try importing it and see if it's still dragging.
All right, you brought it in. All right, so I just imported the Park Tank graphics. So again, there's a lot of different ways to make file to be the exact same size, the composition to be the same size as the file. So I'll click and release, and now I have a composition again. You can't move it around because it's all just like a JPEG. It's just all one image, like it's just one big shape like this. This is not useful. You can't do anything with it because if I rotate the shark, it's going to rotate the words and yada yada yada. So obviously you could break this up in Photoshop, Illustrator, even Premiere if you really wanted to. But an easy way to do it in After Effects is with masking. So masking is universal in a lot of Adobe and definitely in many millions of other programs that use it. But it's a tool used for selecting areas of the screen or layers to hide or change blending modes or many different things. So for our purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm going to select it on my layer. I'm going to come up here right next to the rectangle tool, and it's called the pen tool. The shortcut is G, and once I select it, now I have this option. While I'm still selected, I'm in this pen tool option. Now let's just say we're going to cut out these words here. So I'm literally just going to click, and it's going to create a point, click, create another point, and if I click and drag, it'll round the corner, so more like a circle, and you'll get those two Bezier handles, and that's what allows you to create the bend, as well as if you continue to draw, you'll go all around. I'll cut this out, and then I'll go signifier for closing the shape, or closing the path. So now I'll click this, and you'll see everything else disappear. Now I've selected this, and and if I did the exact same thing, but with the other two parts, I'll have all three individual parts. So if I duplicate my layer, right-clicking on it, and hitting, actually, no, there's no option there. The shortcut for it's easiest if you just do Command D. It'll duplicate it. You'll get an exact copy of it right there. And then what I would do is within it, and once you create a mask also, in the drop-down arrow, you'll see here, now instead of just being transforms, I have transforms and masks. I'll click on masks, and there's my mask. I have many options for them as far as what it can be, the path, the opacity, the feather, and the expansion. All of those are great tools. So if I want to expand it to be shorter because I made it too big, it'll cut in or cut out and give me more of the shape based on my pixel setting here. the opacity, how much is actually being cropped, as well as the feather is the edge. So if I had a piece right there, and I wanted to make it.
The lower one is still big.
Thank you. Yeah, so now I have this hard edge right here. If I didn't want that hard edge on whatever I'm masking, I could just select the feather and drag it up to a couple pixels, anywhere up to 100, even more, and it'll slowly just kind of give a soft edge to that, so it's not as harsh. And then now, cool. So we'll go back to this real quick. Nope. That's the other thing. So clicking on mask is incredibly troublesome sometimes. I couldn't figure out for like the first 2 years I used this program. You have to click off of it, and you'll see these blocks, and that's how you move everything at once usually, or you click on the individual points. So you'll see when I get this, I can move the entire thing, but when I click on an individual point and it gets that kind of block on that point, that's when you get to move it. So it's incredibly like troublesome, because if you just click a lot, it'll not do what you want sometimes, but you just have to be practiced with it. But I'm just going to reset my mask just because everything's moved around now. And, okay, so again, now we have just our text cut out, but we still have the two other things. I'm going to make sure, so now we can click on our bottom one, I can hit enter to enter the renaming feature, and I can just make sure I know, okay, this is my text. Press enter again, great. I have my text. I'm going to turn that off for right now because I don't need to see it. I'm going to go back to this one, everything again. And again, I can just take my pen tool. Obviously, this shark nose thing looks like it goes off, so I'm going to click off and around. It doesn't matter. It just has to be the shape that you need. Now I have a shark, and I'm going to label it after I duplicate it, or before, it doesn't matter. You just have to relabel it. So this is now. Oops, like went through it. D to duplicate. So now I have a second shark on top of it. Right there, containing everything. And now we get to
So watch it go.
well, magic trick. Is anyone doing this along with me and having this much trouble?
Not
No.
screen recording, probably.
You shouldn't. Alright.
Wow.
And there it is. So now, finally, we have, if we turn everything on, 3 individual layers from one image. And now, with the selection tool, we can do whatever we want with those 3. Again, so we'll take the shark. I want him to start down at the bottom on frame. Drag this guy down. There he is. Okay, and then we're going to, again, go into my transform settings for this layer. And now we, more up. Get his little teeth. And yeah, that's good. Or maybe we can get him a little bit smaller, so he'll get bigger as he goes up. And there's no right answers with this. You're just making up whatever you want it to look like. Make it up. Make it fun. So again, reset it, and then I'll go to pick an increment, 20 frames, 10 frames. You just kind of have to think of the motion. And then, come on. I missed the scale. Go back. Scale. There. 20 frames. Go back up.
It's back to frame 0, just so you
Oh my.
know.
There it is. No, what the heck? Stay there.
Is it trying to play back?
I have no idea what it's trying to do.
Everything you did in the past 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And
Just a 5-second delay. It's not that hard.
I'm clicking.
You might want to kill the screen.
Yeah, we're gonna kill the screen recording.
All right, bye.
Yeah, bye guys.